Atlantis does not disappear underwater, it vanishes under confidence. For 2,000 years, the legend keeps finding new places to hide. The story begins with the only person who ever actually told it, Plato. In Timaeus and Critias, Atlantis is rich, advanced, corrupted, and destroyed in a single night. 9,000 years before Plato lands you around 9600 BCE. No cities, no writing, no metallurgy. Humanity is still figuring out agriculture. Atlantis functions like allegory, a mirror held up to Athens. Plato never mentions Atlantis anywhere else, not Herodotus, not Thucydides, no independent trace. Even within Plato's circle, the story does not survive as fact. No inscriptions, no trade goods, no mention in king lists, nothing. Continents do not sink overnight. Continental crust is buoyant, like a cork. The dramatic collapse is a narrative move, not how the planet behaves. Sonar mapping reveals the seabed in unprecedented detail. If Atlantis sank, surely it would be there. The Atlantic floor is young and well understood. No submerged continent, no ruins under miles of sediment. If it was not a continent, maybe it was just an island, smaller, easier to lose. Around 1600 BCE, Santorini erupts with world-shaking force. Here, finally, is a real disaster. Santorini erupts thousands of years after Plato's date. The fit is emotional, not chronological. History caught Santorini before legend could. We mapped it, we read it, we measured it. New candidates appear, the Bahamas, the Azores, Antarctica, wherever the map offers a blank. Underwater, every straight line feels like intention. Examined closely, the pattern matches natural beach rock and erosion, not construction. Humans are built to see intention, especially where visibility is bad and hope is loud. Cities shed evidence, tools break, pottery shatters, garbage accumulates, empires scatter artifacts across continents. Atlantis leaves nothing. Troy was once dismissed as myth, until the ground answered back. The Indus-cities were unknown until their streets and drains surfaced from the soil. Prehistory was rewritten by stones that still stood where humans left them. In Critias, the Atlantis story simply stops, mid-sentence. Atlantis did not sink, it was written. What survived was the certainty and the hunger it feeds. The Atlantis template migrates into the modern world, a claim, a circle, a promise of hidden truth. Once you click, the system learns what you want to believe. The legend survives because it can be sold as a journey, not a conclusion. Underwater data is ambiguity with a grid on top. And grids invite architecture. A mystery that never ends is a business model. Reality changes with perspective. The closer you get, the cleaner shapes get messier. Archaeology is not a vibe. It is materials, context, and tests that do not care what you hope to find. The most common ending is the simplest. Rock is rock. When one place fails, the legend survives by relocating. Sometimes Atlantis is adopted as heritage, a prestige claim disguised as discovery. Confidence hardens into hostility when the story becomes personal. Extraordinary claims carry their own weight. The burden is on the claim, not on doubt. A claim that cannot be disproven cannot be tested, and a claim that cannot be tested cannot graduate into history. When artifacts do not appear, the story upgrades itself into secrecy. Knowledge too advanced to leave traces. Civilizations cannot hide their debris. Even secrets have leftovers. Plato builds dialogues the way an engineer builds a demonstration, to make an idea visible. Atlantis is the warning. Athens is the ideal. The flood is the punchline. The myth persists not because it is plausible, but because it is useful. Ask three things. Who is the source? What is the date? And where is the independent evidence? Who is the source? One author, one set of dialogues, and then silence. What is the date? A world too early for the city Plato describes. Independent evidence would scatter across the world. Atlantis leaves no fingerprints. Atlantis is emotionally efficient. Lost greatness, hidden knowledge. A secret that flatters the believer. The real story is slower and bigger. Oceans opening, crust forming, continents drifting. Continental crust resists subduction. The planet does not do overnight vanishing acts on command. Land disappears slowly. Erosion, sea level rise, volcanic collapse. Not a continent slipping away in a night. Real disasters leave signatures, layers, deposits, debris, dates. They can be read. The evidence against Atlantis is overwhelming. It just arrives slowly, and the legend runs faster. Atlantis is not a continent waiting to be found. It is a story built to warn and repurposed to sell certainty. Atlantis did not sink, but the appetite that invented it is still here, and it is already looking for its next island. The next island never needs to be real. It only needs to be shareable. Belief has distribution. Evidence has shipping costs. Science does not begin by asking what it could be. It begins by asking what it must leave behind. When evidence is missing, the story recruits an enemy to explain the silence. A cover-up story is a perfect shelter. It explains why nothing can be checked. The difference is not intelligence, it is patience. Underwater archaeology is possible because real sites leave patterns that survive contact, context, cargo, fragments. Evidence is portable. It can be shared, checked, and rechecked by people who disagree. Real civilizations fill rooms. Atlantis leaves an empty shelf. Plato makes it sound like history. That is the spell. A civilization powerful enough to shake the world would have more than one witness. When a claim cannot be found, it transforms into a secret that cannot be reached. A secret offers a reward, not knowledge, but status. For a believer, a correction is not information. It is an attack. History is not found by guessing. It is found by removing the world one careful layer at a time. Real claims come with a trail. Not a vibe, not a villain, a trail. Atlantis ends on paper. Everything after that is projection. Atlantis is emotionally useful. It promises that the world once made sense and that meaning is hidden, not absent. The loud version feels alive. The true version often looks like paperwork. Do not start with a name. Start with measurements. The ocean does not owe us a revelation. It only offers what is there. Confidence is the flood. The first drop is the line you choose to draw. Atlantis is built as a mirror. Power, arrogance, punishment. A lesson that can survive without proof. Civilizations rise and fall. The legend refuses to die because it does not need to be true to be useful. Pattern is a starting point. Proof is the finish line. Most myths never leave the starting point. Sometimes the bravest thing is to leave the blank space blank. How continents move, how cities leave debris, how myths form. The real story is bigger than the myth. Atlantis did not hide beneath the waves. It lives here, ink, paper, and a lesson. Change the name, keep the template, blurry image, confident narration, endless relocation. Atlantis is not the mystery. The mystery is how easily certainty outlives evidence and whether we will keep feeding it. Here is the moment myths are born, the pause before the pin. The post offers the same bargain: share first, verify later. 3 questions decide whether this deserves a pin. The source is a loop. Everyone repeating, nobody owning the claim. No coordinates, no timestamp, just vibes. The file has been cleaned of the very details that make it testable. When you anchor the world, the illusion loses its footing. The fastest way to humility is to ask someone who lives in the details, not a wall, not a road, an artifact of processing. When proof appears, the myth protects itself by attacking the messenger. No trail, no context, no samples, no pin. The myth does not need to be right, it needs to be watched. You do not defeat a myth by humiliating a believer. You slow it down with questions. The myth weakens when it is asked to pay in receipts. Plato did not build Atlantis to be excavated. He built it to be believed long enough to teach. The destruction is timed like theater because it is theater. All the certainty in the world cannot turn one story into a civilization. Continents do not vanish in a night. Physics refuses the premise. When the claim fails, it does not end. it changes shape. Real discoveries get more solid the closer you get. The legend survives by never staying still long enough to be pinned down. Confidence can be edited into pixels. The quiet power of science is not the conclusion, it is the method you can repeat. Atlantis is a story that reads like history because it is meant to persuade. It stops. Not because Atlantis sank, but because the lesson is complete. Curiosity is not the enemy. Undisciplined certainty is. The danger was never the water, it was the label. The ocean is not hiding Atlantis, it is just being an ocean. The real endurance is the impulse to see a pattern and call it destiny. Not every blank needs a story. The template does not retire, it waits for a new name. Ask who, ask when, ask where the independent trail begins. Science is slower than romance, but it is faithful to the world. Atlantis did not wait beneath the waves. It waited inside the urge to be certain. The ending is not a find. It is a decision you make every time the next headline arrives. If Atlantis taught anything, it is this: the next story will arrive wearing the same costume. A myth collapses when it is forced to fill in the blanks it depends on. The entire continent begins as ink on fibers, not stone, not metal, not debris. Atlantis is engineered to fall. That is why it falls so cleanly. The myth survives because it feels like an answer. The fastest stories are the ones that demand no waiting. A label is instant. A measurement is slow. Only one can be checked. Atlantis does not get a pin because it does not earn one. The hardest part is not learning the truth. It is living without the easy lie. Plato used Atlantis as a mirror for arrogance, power that mistakes itself for permanence. Confidence is not evidence, but it can drown evidence if we reward it. The first act of skepticism is not a rebuttal, it is a delay. Without the stamp, the ocean stops being a stage and becomes a place. The real narrative is not sudden. It is continuous, forces, traces, and time you can measure. Atlantis was never a place to find. It was a warning about what happens when power mistakes itself for truth. The myth dies when the blank stays blank. Curiosity survives. It just learns to walk instead of sprint. The sea holds real histories, just not the ones the myth promised. This is what a trail looks like: boring, repeatable, and shared. Atlantis survives because it promises hidden greatness. Science promises something harder: uncertainty with honesty. Nature draws lines. Our job is not to worship them, but to test them. Atlantis did not sink beneath waves. It sank beneath confidence. The world will always offer blanks. The question is what we choose to pour into them. Next time the headline arrives, the story is not about the ocean. It is about your pause. Atlantis was written. What survives is the lesson. Certainty can outlive evidence unless we stop feeding it.